Stanley Kubrick is one of the greatest filmmakers in the history of the art form. He is also one of the most insane. 9 times out of 10, whenever you hear about Stanley Kubrick, it's usually about how insane he was. Even Warner Brothers, in their own documentary about Stanley Kubrick, started off by listing a whole bunch of newspapers that called him crazy, eccentric, a megalomaniac, whatever. There are numerous accounts of Kubrick pushing his actors to their limits in his films. Shelley Duvall was straight up traumatized after The Shining.
I can't even get this door open.
For a person so charming and so likable, indeed lovable, he can do some pretty cruel things when you're filming.
And Kubrick went out of his way to actively strain Tom Cruise's and Nicole Kidman's marriage during the production of Eyes Wide Shut. Kubrick was also just a strange individual. He filmed parts of Full Metal Jacket and Eyes Wide Shut in London, despite both movies taking place in, not London. Why? Because Kubrick hated flying despite being a trained pilot himself. There are also a bunch of conspiracies that Kubrick got himself into. Even his own death is a conspiracy. But you're not here for schizo ramblings. You're here because you wanted to know about Kubrick and his directing techniques. So let's get into that, starting with cinematography. Kubrick loves symmetry. He doesn't really follow this rule religiously like, say, Wes Anderson, but it happens often enough for you to notice. Another thing Kubrick likes to do is tracking shots. From Paths of Glory to Eyes Wide Shut, there's not one single Kubrick film that doesn't have a tracking shot. Let's take a look at this scene from Full Metal Jacket. The Marines are escorting some tanks through a war-torn city in Vietnam. Before they enter, some explosives go off, killing one of them. They can't bring in the tanks lest they be blown to hell, so they send in the soldiers to mop up any NVA that might be sticking around. When they're entering the city, we follow them at a low height through the rest of the shot, almost like we're crouching down following these soldiers. It's important to note that Kubrick places his cameras in a more observational role. With a director like, say, Steven Spielberg, he uses cinematography in a way that helps us feel emotionally aligned with the characters. With Kubrick, no such thing exists. This disconnection from the characters also gives his films a sense of emotional detachment, contributing to feelings of isolation. Kubrick also likes to use long shots in order to make some tension in a scene. This can best be seen in 2001 with Frank Poole's spacewalk scene. This also helps me perfectly transition into the next section, editing. As said before, Kubrick likes to use longer shots in his editing. This allows us to not only analyze what the character is doing in that moment, but also the environment around them as well. These scenes are everywhere in Barry Lyndon, and A Clockwork Orange. Another thing Kubrick likes to do is something called internal montage. This style of editing allows us to understand what a certain character is feeling or thinking at that time. Let's take a look at another scene from Full Metal Jacket, specifically the one where 8-Ball is shot by the sniper. If you pay close enough attention, you'll notice that the audio and the visuals don't match up. It's almost as if we're looking at what these soldiers are thinking in that moment.
Okay, listen up. Did anybody see a sniper? Did anybody see anything? Anybody see a sniper? Okay, then save your ammo. Nobody fire till I tell you.
They hear 8-Ball's screams from a distance and can't help but visualize what is happening to him.
This is Cowboy over. If they decide to hit us, we'll have to pull back fast.
The use of slow motion also adds to how visceral the scene is. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Kubrick stare. The Kubrick stare is a method of shot composition where a character stares at the camera with a forward tilt. This conveys to the audience that the character in question is at the peak of their derangement. Admittedly, Kubrick isn't the inventor of this technique. That goes to Alfred Hitchcock when he made Psycho. But Kubrick was the one that really pioneered this technique. Thanks to Kubrick's influence, many other filmmakers have decided to use this technique as well. Films like The Dark Knight.
Tomorrow you take the big job. You don't have any say in the matter. Commissioner Gordon.
American Psycho.
Camper. Rocking and a rolling.
Oh, brother, look. He presents himself as this harmless old codger, but inside. But inside doesn't matter.
The Silence of the Lambs.
Simplicity. Read Marcus Aurelius. Of each particular thing, ask, what is it in itself? What is its nature? What does he do, this man you seek?
And No Country for Old Men.
What's the most you ever lost on a coin toss?
Sir?
The most you ever lost on a coin toss.
I don't know. I couldn't say.
Call it.
Call it.
Yes.
For what?
Just call it.
All used the Kubrick stare. Even Stanley Kubrick did the Kubrick stare. Multiple times. You know, I once heard that every single photo of Stanley Kubrick makes it look like he never slept a day in his life. Now that I'm looking at these photos, yeah, that's kind of true. Now that we're talking about the man himself, let's get into what I really think of Stanley Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick is my favorite director of all time. Yeah, I know, shocker. He has created films that transcend time and are magnificent pieces of art. These films shook the film industry to its core, and many parts of Kubrick still remain a mystery. And that's probably why his movies are so good. Some of the greatest films of all time are considered the greatest films of all time because they do something different. And that's another great thing about Stanley Kubrick's filmography. He has done at least one movie in every major genre. Crime, dystopia, comedy, war, sci-fi, horror, romance, historical epic, thriller, and each of these movies are considered some of the best in their genre. I can't name any other film director that has that much range. And to finish off this video, I wanted to include a compilation of Kubrick clips. This compilation is from the Kubrick documentary I mentioned earlier, and I wanted to include it because it has some of my favorite shots from the director in it. R.I.P. Stanley Kubrick, you helped redefine cinema.